Again, I'll be doing the introduction and welcoming Brad Andrews. He started his career early as a software development, switched over 10 years ago to information security, applying his skills to compliance, security, and secure information technology functionality most recently. He works for National Health Systems and its subsidiary PDX Incorporated. His main focus is in compliance and security development concerns. He's a lead faculty and area chair in information systems security at online campus of University of Phoenix. He has over 10 years of experience in teaching. He has an interest in anything that's related to computers, particularly in the secure development concerns. Please help me welcome Brad, who will be covering at the 2:30 session threat modeling overview. And again, it's Mr. Brad Andrews.
So, well, thank you all for coming. I hope you don't have good expectations. Didn't put a slide in here, but who here has experience doing threat modeling already? Is anybody active? Okay, so I want to watch out that you don't correct me on things. This is meant to give a good overview of the topic. I hope you all know this is about threat modeling, which is basically looking at threats for when you're developing systems. You're not going to know everything. I didn't put a slide on it, but I had this book in my bag, which I keep flipping through and reading different parts of and skimming around. I highly, highly recommend it. I even did the common IT practice of borrowing some information from the author on one of his other speeches, which I actually referenced in a slide, so you can check him out. Really good stuff out there. Who am I? Well, she said, I've been working in the tech field for a long time. It's amazing. You get old and you go, everybody else is getting so much younger. All these crowds, there's a few a lot closer to my age, but I'm getting nearer to the end of my career, I think, than the beginning at sometimes, although maybe not in the way things are going. I worked in defense, worked for literally the military, worked for a think tank, worked for AOL before it was AOL and before it went up and down. Got to be in my very first layoff there, where three of our technical, out of a group of six that were on a games development group, three of us were gone that afternoon. Now, I was still young and naive at the time, and I was glad to be out doing game development for free. Well, excuse me, I was supposed to get paid, but not highly lucrative for me, contrary to what you may hear of the stories. I've also worked with banking, a lot of work with Bank One, which I guess was bought out by JP Morgan a few years ago here, and is now kind of centered here, so it's interesting. Or at least there's a lot of presence here. Airlines, worked with both major airlines in town at one point in time in my career. I was saying a dot bomb. Who knows what a dot bomb means anymore? Is enough of you out here? Okay, so it's fading its humor value these days. But that was an interesting thing. Worked in, and now I'm working for a company called PDX Inc. It's actually, I technically work for National Health Systems, but that's the parent company of PDX Inc. We're one of the two large suppliers of pharmacy software and services in the country. A very small privately held company, but we go up against a very large publicly held company, and we keep our own. We do the pharmacy for half the open market. Now, some places don't, like CVS and Walgreens, I'm told, have their own internal system, so we don't have their market. I don't count their share. Now, what else? BS and an MS in computer science from Illinois. Great computer school. It's been a few years since I've been there. I like to tell people I just missed being a millionaire because Mark Anderson, who started Netscape, was there 3 years after I was there, and if I just stayed a little longer, who knows where I'd be. I have way too many certs to list, but this is the 3 active ones right now. I got to finish applying for a couple others, and I have some SANs rolled off, but I still passed them. Already went through the work. I also I'm the lead faculty area chair for University of Phoenix's online campus, the information system security area. So if anybody's interested in that, or you got ideas for me, hey, talk to me later. Love the stuff. I love teaching sometimes. I don't know who here teaches classes at all. And at least one of you back there does, but it's fun and it's frustrating. So, both. Okay, my opinions and ideas are mine alone. I guess I should have said mine there. They're not my employers necessarily, or anybody else anywhere on the earth other than me. Today's sessions, this is meant to be a 3-part series. You can decide how well you like it when we're through it, if you want to stay for the other parts, but they're designed to build on each other, and it's designed to be interactive. I don't want to just sit up here and just talk to you. There's some stuff to talk about, but then I want us to work through some stuff. I will grant I don't have like a Visio here, which would be a little bit easier to draw with. I have paint, so our flow diagram may be interesting, but I'm not looking at a fancy flow. And I did UML in the past, and I haven't been keeping as much up on what the exact standards are today, and I'm not a UML expert, so some of you can correct if needed. Okay, threat modeling overview today. We want to look at what is threat modeling. What are we doing? Why is it important? How do you do it? Why flow diagrams and I'd say other documentation are important, and some dangers to avoid. What is threat modeling? Well, I tried to pick some interesting artwork. They're a little bit harder to find artwork for this, something like that. So, but you see this individual, they got their bags almost falling off, the coffee cups thrown out, the files falling down. That's what we face today, is our systems face many different dangers from different areas, lots of things we got to watch and make sure they're all happening at once. The whole goal of threat modeling is figuring out, and ideally, as I'll talk about later, early on versus later on, figuring out what are those threats. Microsoft has some really good guidance, and probably the leading guidance in the field, and I'll again plug their book again. I highly recommend you buy this. I actually own it, this in both hard copy and on my Kindle, so it's well worth it if you're interested in this field at all. And having that, and there's also a good overview, and I stole a couple ideas from them later on, or borrowed, using the proper academic phrase. I don't have full APA citations, but the references are at the OWASP site. They have a really good summary page if you want to read over some notes and go into a lot more depth than I'm going to go into. Oh, by the way, if you have questions as I'm going along, I skimmed over something too quick, or there's something you want to bring up, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll try to interrupt me. And if I'm getting off course, you can tell me stop chasing that squirrel, because I do follow squirrels a lot. Good background video, if you want another good background video, which I highly recommend. Stumbled upon this on YouTube a while back. I've watched it a couple times, but it's Threat Modeling Lessons from Star Wars. And it's kind of cool because he uses a lot of stuff from Star Wars to kind of connect to this too. So I was tempted to just steal his talk, but I said, no, I won't quite do that. But I got his top 10 in here, but we're going to go a lot faster than he went there. Here, when you'll come to protect against threats, you'll hit points where you've protected against your high priority threats that you identified in that cycle. It's kind of like, are you familiar with agile development? It's the same point in agile development. Are you meant to be done with agile development in reality? Yes, you want a shipping product, okay? But you don't want to be done. You want to iterate. Does that help? Yeah, you never want to be totally, but because this is, even if you could hit every threat in the system today, tomorrow there's going to be some 0 day that you go, how the heck was that there? The bash vulnerability, I was just talking with somebody in the hallway about it. Everybody know the whole problem with that? That was for years. This is in publicly available code that nobody caught. So what makes us think in this system that we developed ourselves, we're going to catch all of them? Yeah, right. You want to buy a bridge? Not going to happen. Does that help meet your question? Okay, and the question was, how do we, what indicates we're done on the different stages around? Got to remember to say that. Okay, sir.
So you may get to this. Isn't there software available too that you can run against your code, at least just against, say, the OWASP? You give you some sense of how the code hit with
The question is there software that you can run against your code to find common flaws? Is that sound correct? Yes, there's code you can run against it to possibly find some common flaws. A little off our topic, but I will note that from what I've heard, the stuff that you can run against code finds like 20 to 30% of the problems. The stuff you run against a running system finds 20 to 30% of the problems, and there's overlap in those. Some you're not going to find unless you just check it out yourself. That said, that is not really threat modeling, that's really bug hunting. I can't remember, I should remember, because we're using it. There's a J something, some Java tool that will find, and I don't know if it's find bugs or it's something else like that. Anybody here familiar with find bugs? If you write Java code, you can run find bugs. Find, F-I-N-D-B-U-G-S. Okay. Yeah, a lot of commercial products have it, but I think it's also, it's freely available, which my company really likes. So, and I'm sure others of you would have similar experiences at your company. There's some stuff you can do with that, but realize that's not going to tell you threats. That's going to tell you what are your risk at. Now, it might go through and tell you, oh, you don't have an SQL injection possibility because, it's looking for specific things. It may not, though. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think FindBugs will find SQL injection because it won't know you're building a query to send in the table that somebody could have put, escape stuff in. So does that answer your question? Okay. So you have that. If you have a question on any of these traps, again, we're hitting this a lot faster than he goes through in that presentation, although he does do the first 3 or 4 fairly in depth, and then he goes, oops, I'm behind, and then goes a little bit faster too. With the show stack thing, you can find other variants of that. I think he did a Google talk, and he did something else that was related to it, or I don't know if he did a Google talk. Anybody here get lost on YouTube? I'm not talking about watching the, cats flying through the air or whatever videos. I'm talking about actually serious tech stuff. I could spend an afternoon plus just on one chain. I look for one video and get lost. Working in a vacuum, you want to make sure, I did say that before that the monolithic processes, that your process has multiple components, but there's also your process or system will relate to other processes and systems, and you have to think of that. A good analogy I like to look at is if you've looked at any of the recent breaches that have been a big problem, a common thread I've heard a lot about was that somebody broke into a vendor or something like that, and then they broke into the main company. They didn't just come right in the main company. They broke in an easier, quote unquote, easier way and went in there. You want to watch for your system that you may say, oh, well, we can trust that system, that's that system. Well, what if they've compromised that system? You still want to watch for threats there. Trap 5, threat modeling is an innate skill. Well, just like, any of you here play a musical instrument? What? Bass guitar or bass violin? Bass guitar. You think you'll ever be on stage for a rock concert or anything like that? That's a dangerous question to ask because maybe you are that good. But most people who play bass probably wouldn't. Well, I don't know. I guess rock concerts you can get by with a little less quality sometimes, but no, just kidding. Most of us aren't going to play. Most of the people who play the violin or piano are never going to be at Carnegie Hall, right? But they can get reasonably good at what they do, good enough that people can tolerate listening to them. Most of them, when they started, you prefer not to be there. Anybody have kids taking music lessons? You'd probably rather be away. I got to run to the store right now. What do you know? I'm out of X, Y, or Z. Keep in mind with threat modeling, your first couple attempts may suck. But they're the first attempts. That's how you learn. You do learn this by doing. Now, it helps to have some experience and some guidance. Fortunately, there's a lot of information out there and some input you can get. But really, all you're doing is just learning and honing your skill of seeing threats and evaluating them. And as we're going to look at numbers later, you don't have to... that wasn't a 7. That was really a 6. You idiot. How could you get that wrong? No, it doesn't matter that much. Maybe over time, you're going to be able to say, oh, yeah, that's a this. Now, you got to watch, though, too, because you've all probably known experts in a field who think they know it all, and they did know quite a bit, but they can also be off in some areas. So always be teachable as you're going forward. So realize that really threat modeling is something you can learn and be better at, whether you're an expert or not. Think like an attacker. Example Showstack gives, which I really liked, was that's like me telling most of you, think like a chef. I'd like to learn how to barbecue really well. Does anybody here barbecue really well? Some of you, it's probably easier. For me, I'll put the meat in, I'll do everything I need to, and it's going to be burned on the outside and red on the inside. It doesn't work the same way. So if you told me, no, well, think like a master chef, it's not going to help me. I need some step-by-step guidance. A checklist, which I refer to in something else, can be helpful. Or right there is the checklist that can help you say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and then it helps guide you through it. Keep in mind, too, that checklists can be useful even if you're an expert at what it is. Anybody here fly here for this? Probably not so much for this, but anybody flown recently? Yeah? Anybody flown ever? Anybody gonna raise? Can I ask any question to raise your hand for? you want your pilot to be an expert pilot, right? Now, do you want to be able to say, well, he's an expert pilot. He should know what to do. He should sit down. I don't want him to have to follow a checklist. I want him just to know what to do. No. I want him to follow a checklist because they don't make mistakes when they follow a checklist. Hospitals, they amputate the wrong limb. Well, if they follow a checklist, it still will happen occasionally because people are people, but much less likely. So saying, do this, do this, do this. Loosely, if you will, these 3 sessions are going to be a checklist of sorts. First, we're looking at, let's design their data flow diagram. Hopefully, you got to keep track of the time. And then let's go on ahead and, do the stride and then do the dread approach. But follow your stuff. Sir? Yeah, the question was, is there still value in thinking like an attacker? And I would say yes. Now, let me ask, who here, and this is a self-assessment question, but feels you can really think deviously? That you can think how to break stuff? I think it is only a limited number. To me, it comes naturally. Now, I'm not the social engineer. There are some people who can go in and pretend and break social engineer and walk in and come out with a bag of money, okay? That's not me. I'm too honest, whatever. But I can sure think of how somebody could do that, and I can think about how to design the system because my mind will go through, well, how do you break this? I was talking a little while ago about Y2K stuff, and I was doing some Y2K testing of a system. Well, what if you do this? And the system broke, and the guy was just in the middle of delivering it, and he said, I hate you. Because he had to go back and code and fix the bug I just found, because I said, if you do this, this, and this. I ended up having his job in about 6 months because I ended up doing some development back to that. But see, so yes, you can think like an attacker. I'd encourage you. Some of you, I do know it's going to be hard. You're just too, I haven't quite codified, and maybe some other instructors may have thought more about it, but some people just have trouble thinking that way. My bet is it's more conditioning than it is actual inability to think that way, but I don't know. It's just like with computers. Have some of you noticed some people take to computers a lot easier than other people take to computers? That happens. Now, kids are growing up today are going to tend to be more take to it because they're surrounded by it. But some people will think more like the attacker. But just telling somebody, well, think like an attacker. Anybody here passed in the Russian mob? Well, if you have, don't raise your hand. Probably most of us haven't been in the Russian mob. So telling us to think like a Russian mobster or even a U.S. mobster probably is going to be a bit more challenging. But now we can go through and say, well, what's things they've done in the past? Here's what they've done, and hit that. And then that's where, if you're threat modeling, you might bring somebody in who has experience with it to say, oh, have you considered this? What about this? Even if they don't know your system, they may be able to say, what about this area? Sir? To kickstart a program on that? Or? Oh, the stride. Oh, I see what you're saying. Got it. The stride does think like an attacker to a point. It does to a point. It's also meant to dig through. You're down at the creek bed. You're trying to say which of these rocks are interesting. Well, this kind of one. Or, well, we might be able to find an arrowhead down here. Maybe because whatever. Kind of yes. So there's merit to that. Threat modeling is a single skill. You threat model, that's it. Well, it has at least 2 parts, which is technique, the approaches to take. Again, stride and dread are 2 approaches to it. The drawing out a data flow diagram, data flow diagrams are different approaches. You can do them in UML, you can do them in other things, but they're different approaches. But the knowledge is helpful too. It reminds me of a story. I was in Naval ROTC for 2 years in college till I got cold feet, and nobody's old enough to have been around then, but it was only 2 years school and then 4 years of commitment. Now it's like you're in for a long time. But I got cold feet at that time. I said, that's 6 years of my life. I can't give up 6 years of my life. Looking back, 6 years wasn't very long at all, but okay, it seemed like forever back then. But I remember one of my the chiefs who was teaching a class we were in said, it was the guy who came in to fix a boiler. It was backing up, and he came hit the pipe, and wham, and it started working. And then he sent him a bill for $10,000. He said, what's this bill for $10,000 for doing? They said, well, it was $10 for hitting the spot with the pipe, and it was $9,990 for knowing where to hit the spot with the pipe. You need the knowledge and you need the technique. I mean, it's like we just moved to a new house and I'm doing some home stuff. It's like, okay, where do I say that I can gain the technique myself and the knowledge, and where do I just pay somebody else who knows the technique and knowledge the money? And that's the trade-off. Yeah. And then we'd already jumped past that, so I jumped. Think like an attacker is down there. Some people can stretch outside their current experience, some people can't. Or I wouldn't say can't, but some people struggle with it more than others. So if you're in management too and you're telling people here to work on threat modeling, don't get ticked at them or put it down if they can't think outside their box in that sense, because maybe they just can't think deviously enough. Maybe it'll take some training to get them to think that way. It's just like if you've ever been through security awareness training, that should get you to think outside your little narrow box and help start thinking about things that are more dangerous. The same thing like this, it may take some training and time. Trap 8 is kind of the similar, one model to rule them all. We are only going to draw like a flow diagram if we can get it done, but the whole thing is you probably have modeled the system, you're going to have models of the threats, and here's where you get to do, like, if you want to think like an attacker but you don't know it, you may find somebody who's done some thinking on, well, this attackers, the Russian mob, they're driven by this, money. It's like the old saying, but I think it was one of the bank robbers like Jesse James, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Some people, that's what they're motivated by. They're looking for the money. Some people, if some 3-letter acronym agency in the U.S. attacks an Iranian nuclear facility, are they in it for the money? Probably not. They're in it to do something else, or vice versa. If China's coming here, ultimately they may be in it for the money, but they may be doing industrial espionage for something else. That's the things you got to think about: is what are the motivations? So you kind of want to model your attacker. What are they looking for? You also want to model your user as well. Is what are they looking to do? What kind of things do they do? Keep in mind that a threat to the system is not always generated by an outside person trying to do harm. Sometimes it's generated by an inside person who's just stupid, inadvertently. And it may be somebody who's really should know better, like me. Okay, I mean, you don't have to be total, it's always that idiot who doesn't know the computer at all. No. Sometimes we know too much and we cause problems because we think one thing and do it, or we just don't realize what we're doing, or any number of things. Remember that one of the very first PayPal phishing emails I got, I think I responded to, and I realized, when I realized quickly, I said, crud. And I went and changed my password really fast. But it caught me. Now, this was either early on in my field or when I was still doing development, not this, but still, even then. So people will get caught, but people also do, some of it, let's say a cord laying across on a floor. Does anybody have somebody trip over it and pull down a key system because there's a cord in the wrong place? Now, that was a poor design. You don't put a cord where your people are walking across. And that you would have caught that with the threat modeling, because you would have said, well, the threat of somebody unplugging the system is a threat. Losing power is a threat. How could we lose power? Well, somebody could pull the power cord. Somebody could pull it on purpose. Somebody could pull it accidentally. And what are ways they can pull the power? Well, they could pull the cord out of the wall. They could run a truck into our interconnection. Talking out there about, in Texas, how many power lines in Texas are underground versus above ground? Any feel for that? I know a lot of them are underground here now, but somebody was saying there's a whole bunch above ground too. I come from the Midwest mostly. I've been around the country, but they were mostly above ground. You had the poles. They're above ground here. So there you got the problem of somebody running a truck into the pole, and then boom, your whole neighborhood's down, or something like that. So that's what you got to think about. Trap 9, focus only on the threats. The thing there is you've got to think about what impact do requirements have. Okay, well, that's a threat. Somebody steals our company lunch picnic menu. What do I care? Not really. Are they going to try to poison the whole company at lunch? Maybe. Okay. But I'm not going to sweat that issue as I am going to be, they get our database of, with HIPAA data, PHI data of all our clients. Oh, that's a little more concerning. Let me deal with HIPAA here. Just a little bit, okay. You're a little more blessed because HIPAA's a pain. I did PCI in the past, and that's at least check. HIPAA's, I don't know. Well, not quite, but almost. And then the mitigations, what have they done already to solve this? Maybe they've already spent some effort looking at this. Not that you want to ignore, you say, well, we've already looked at that, we don't need to think about that anymore. You want to come back, as we talked about, the iterative process and visit stuff again, but you don't want to spend too much time hashing over stuff again. How do you know which? What is it, the famous lawyer answer? It depends. There's no firm answer. There's no, here's when you do this much, here's when you do that much. You just got to have a feel for it. You know, who here has been in the tech field more than 10 years? Okay. So you have a feel for some things, right? You've developed an understanding a little bit on some things. That's what you got to continue honing, continue applying. It may be a new area, but you can continue to apply it to what you know and say, oh, okay, that is similar to that. Hey, oh, I have seen that. That's what the students in my classes, I always try to tell them, okay, because a lot of them come in, I've never worked in IT at all, because they want to get into IT, so that's why they're taking an IT degree. And I say, well, but you've used IT. I mean, there's nobody here who hasn't, especially because with Phoenix, we have an online classroom, so you have to use IT. You can't, there's no way you can't use online. So you can't submit your assignments. I guess you could, but you'd fail out of class pretty quickly. So you have to have used it at some point. So you have some experience base. Will apply what the experience you have to go do what you're doing. And then trap 10, waiting too long. Oh, we're going to ship this next week. We need to do a quick threat modeling session on it. Probably too late. Ideally, the first cut on this should be in the design phase. You might even do it in the step before that where you're figuring out requirements. Not heavily, you're not going to dive heavily down into it if you don't even know what the system's doing, but you might say, well, what kind of stuff? Well, okay, well, if we're storing PHI data, well, or we're storing credit card numbers, well, that means that we got to make sure the database is protected away, or this, there's certain things you can know as you've gone on with it, what to do. Any questions on any of these dangers? Sir?
The checklist you mentioned earlier, do you have some of those in the book, or do you have other references?
Showstack mentioned a checklist manifesto. I don't know if that's just general on the topic or not. I would say something like this, but I think that I have not made a checklist up. That's an interesting question, and if I do this again, I'll probably try to make sure I have a couple at hand. Hesitant to say, has anybody heard of any threat modeling checklists? There probably are in the book, and my mind's just not even considering it right now, but does that help somewhat? It doesn't answer your question totally, but does that... Look around. Feel free. I didn't put my email here, but if you want to get my email when we're done, hesitant to throw my email up here totally, because I'll probably be publishing this. My hope is if this recording turns out good, this will be up on YouTube too, so you can go look at it later. But feel free, if you're talking to me afterwards, I'll give my email to you, and I can look into it and give you an answer back then. Okay, interactive time. Some guidelines is try to be involved. Everybody here is not going to say something, so those of you who don't feel like saying anything don't have to. We're not going to have enough time to go do, we're not going to have enough time to do a whole lot, but we'll do a little bit. Don't monopolize. I know I tend to be the one who always, once I start talking, hard to shut me up. This is great for me because, hey, nobody's going to tell me to stop talking, right? Work together. We want to try to work together on something. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hit Amazon. See how well this is the experimental part of my talk, but the Amazon system. So let's look at Amazon.com.